Hello there. Is this zoomed in far enough? This is Larry Podsobinski, and another one of my, dubbed by my brother-in-law, Jeff Fauner, fireside chats that he likes a lot and encourages me to do more of. So it's been a while, and I asked myself, what can I talk about tonight? And I thought it was remembering a friend of mine who was a friend of almost, but not quite 25 years before he died, 12 years ago, over 12 years ago. And he was like the Beatles song Dr. Robert. But there was a Beatles song, Dr. Robert, helping everyone in need, helping everyone in need. No one helps you out like off Dr. Robert. And his name was Robert Bobby Horvath. And he had deforming, very crippling osteo and rheumatoid arthritis when I met him, like in the mid 80s, 1980s. And so, I used to help him out. I didn't have a vehicle then, so he picked me up when he got payday and for his disability. And I'd go shop with him, and he would ride the electric cart and needed somebody to reach the top shelves for him and help him with stuff. So I do that for him. And he was a little guy, 110 pounds, and he might have only weighed under 100 when he died, but he played 12 string guitar, and I wrote about him in my book, In the Grip of Paranoid Schizophrenia, third edition, available on Amazon.com or wherever you buy books, find books online. But I mentioned him, referred to him here and there in the story. But anyways, when I met him, he lived in this old farmhouse out on a dirt road, in the middle of nowhere, and he'd leave the door open and for his cats, many cats that he had, and for friends to come up and holler at him in there, and to the point. In those days, I used to go with him up to the state capitol, where he'd go to the university medical center and was involved in experimental treatments for arthritis, trying to arrest and reverse the effects of the deforming rheumatoid and osteoarthritis. So that was my only trip to the Capitol, and was with Bob, and he'd know how to get around, and I didn't, so but there was a couple of times I got a motorcycle one year, and I had to go up a big gravel road to get up to his place, but I got through it on the bike. Okay, I know how to get through there, and there was a couple of times I'm sure, and I remember one vividly, a time when I went to his house and I parked the bike and went down to the door. It was cracked, and I said, hollered in at him, "Hey, Bob." And he said, "Pod." I said, "It's Pod." He said, "Come on in, Pod." He said, "I'm in the back." So I went in the back, and he was in bed. And he said to me, he said, "Pod, if I could get up out of this bed, I'd go in that kitchen, load that rifle, put it in my mouth, and pull the trigger with my toe." Now, I wasn't really well in those days, mentally, with my past schizophrenia now, but even though that being the case, I still had the common sense to know how to talk to the man. I said, "Come on, Bob, you don't really feel that way. Let me make you a cup of coffee." And he always had some pot plants growing in the backyard for his medicine, and in the back 40 there, you call it the back field, but so he put them in 5-gallon buckets, but never could go a decent one. I mean, I see better pictures of them on the computer these days. I mean, healthier plants, but anyways, I told him, "I'll make you some coffee, and you can get a baggie and your scissors, and go. We'll go in the back 40, and you can clip some leaves, and I'll dry them in the oven for you, and you can roll you one, and then you'll feel better." So I made him a cup of coffee, and he'd sit up on the edge of the bed and have his coffee and a cigarette. He couldn't quit smoking tobacco, and that's what killed him anyway in the end. But he was 10 years older than me, and he was 32 days away from being 60 when they found him dead reaching for his breathing nebulizer machine of upper respiratory failure. So I'm glad it's been 9 1/3 years now that I quit smoking, because my lungs were a good candidate to be in that shape, and I'm older than he lived to be now. He was 10 years older than me. So, anyways, So he got out of we floated through the kitchen somehow there. I don't know if we had something to eat, made something to eat or not, but he got his after he had his coffee and we got moving. He got his baggie and his little scissors, and I accompanied him down to the backyard. And I wasn't legally sane at the time anyway, and he's deceased, so who could say what, you know? But but uh, but so he clipped off some leaves off his plants, and then I put him on like a what do you call cookie sheet for him, and put it in the oven. And I said that the door opened to dry it slowly, you know, rapidly rather than normal. But but then he rolled it up. I never could roll anything, but he rolled it up and smoked it. I didn't want any of it. It made me worse in those days with my illness. It must have been on the old medication between the two episodes, if you follow the story in my book. But of my life and how it went with the schizophrenia was no picnic, believe me. But 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 Bob was a friend who didn't throw me away in my ill years. So you know, so I was a friend to him too. So so he went back to the house and he rolled himself one up and he smoked it and then he carefully inhaled it and held it as long as he could, and then he'd exhale and he'd take another puff, and then he got to be feeling better, and then he loved to cook, so he immediately had food in the house all the time, you know, or his cats and himself, and but he could make a big, I don't know what he made that day, but a big huge meal for it. He liked his big main meal at noon, like one in the afternoon or noon or whatever, you know. So he said about cooking a big meal feeling better from his wanting to be blowing his head off with his rifle the morning when I found him there. You know, what I mean, so I went out in the yard and did some yard work with the mower and stuff, and then we had a big meal. You know, and then he usually took a nap, and I worked more in the yard or whatever, and around the place or whatever he wanted to do, work on the door frame or the water heater in the basement or whatever. I helped him out best I could, but during the time he was growing pot and using it, now he's deceased, right? So nobody can say shit about this. But he got caught a few times actually that I'm aware of. The twice he was in the old farmhouse, and the helicopter was flying outside his bedroom window, and he'd look out the window, out the curtains at him, and they would be pointing down at his plants in the 5 gallon buckets in the yard, and pointing toward the street, toward the road, you know. So he knew to get up and to carry his 5 gallon buckets and put them on the porch, and then the cops would come later and they tell him, "Well, we know it's your medicine, Bob." The county sheriff was compassionate in those days, even before decade. This is 1990, before medical marijuana was even heard of, you know, nationally, you know, and worldwide. But this is in salute to medical marijuana worldwide. It's the movement has become to open the door to this kind of as a medicine for people who need it, you know. So this is what this is in tribute to. Uh, and so they pointed to they told him he couldn't have his plans, but they'd have to take him. But he wouldn't be in any trouble. It just you know just take care of yourself otherwise of your illness, you know. And in those days, going to the university where he went, they told he asked him what would happen to him in the long term with his condition, his arthritis, so deforming as it was getting. And they told him if he lives long enough, he'll end up in an electric wheelchair. So that was his major nightmare for all his life, that he would end up in an electric wheelchair, which he did before he died. So he had two helicopter encounters where they took his plants, and I think one time they didn't even say anything. He just set them on the porch. They just came and took them and didn't say a word. He never heard from them again. So then the third time, he was living in another place, and he was in his electric wheelchair, and with his insurance, he had gone from a loaner chair to his own personal electric wheelchair around his house, and he had could go out in the yard with it, I believe, too. And he had some 6 scraggly plants growing in the garden, and so in those days, these later days of his life, he had those. I don't know anything about drugs, but those pain patches, the prescription opiate or whatever pain patches, you know, whatever they have. I don't know what the hell it is, but he had those, and he had them stolen, and he figured out that it had to be his home aide that was doing it because nobody else knew where the key was. So he said next time that happens, he's going to call the sheriff's department. So it happened again. He was out with his neighbor, and the only one who knew where the key in the garage was to the kitchen door was his aide. So he came back and his boxes were in the drawer for the patches, but the patches were all gone, the paint patches, right? So he got the man angry, very angry he could get, and he called the sheriff's department. And because it was a drug related call, they sent the dog sniffer and the K9 they called out or whatever, and they found these scraggly pants in the backyard, and they told him, well, Bob, he's in an electric wheelchair, right? And crippled up as could be, without his shirt on. He was just going to be 60, and he looked like an 80-year-old man with his shirt off, with the way his chest was all sunken, his bones were deformed in his ribs and his wrist and his knees, and especially, and so his hands were like tennis balls with hands coming off the side like this, and the guy was in pain whenever you saw him to begin with, when I met the guy, so he used the pot for the pain and also to motivate him to want to live. So the last time, it was a month before he died when he got this other incident happened, and they told him, well, we can't let you have this pot, you're growing, and you're not in any trouble, but you just take care of yourself with your illness and your condition, and you'll never hear from us again unless you need us. And that's what the cops told him. This was like 12 years ago, so that's like about 2007, I guess. And it was November, and so then in December, then I talked to him one morning, and must have been the 12th, and then the 14th, he must have died like 32. They found him dead, reaching for his nebulizer machine. His neighbor always checked on him every morning once he got moving. So, so the moral of the story is, I guess, is that now the door is open with these newer studies in medical marijuana. That this is one person I know that definitely his quality of life was improved, his pain level was improved probably a lot. He claimed, and I didn't need to do it with him. It was his thing. But he also knew somebody else with brain cancer that was his age that also passed away before he did. But she smoked it too, but I didn't know her. But they together medicated themselves before medical marijuana was even fashionable, or even those words were thought of or put together. Besides, other than the grassroots community of the 70s and 60s, where that was all known to be, that's just the way it is. It's a medicine, you know. So there's the story of Dr. Robert Horvath, medical marijuana user, deceased, and so nobody could say anything. I was not legally sane at the time. I was helping him do this kind of thing, just to medicate himself, Blicky's plans. So you can't hold me responsible for saying what I did at the time. So, but I did nothing wrong. I was just helping. I knew what would help him. I knew him and know what he did there for help, and I just helped him. Maybe if somebody tells you they're going to put a rifle in their mouth and pull the trigger all crippled up with their toe, you're not going to try to help them. However, you know that it'll help them. That's all I was doing. I knew if he went out in the backyard and picked something and dried it and smoked it, he'd feel like probably cooking a big meal. So that's what I tried to do. It's help the guy, and it really did help Dr. Bobby Horvath. It's in memory of the medical marijuana users, and including him and any others there are, all the others there are the world over. Peace and have a good night, day, or wherever you're at in your day.